Hi, everyone. This is Lori Watkin with the TheraPlay family of companies. Welcome to our webinar this evening on peaceful parenting, managing anxiety and stress for parents, caregivers, and kids during the pandemic. I wanted to introduce you to our presenters and also our panel of experts that are going to be talking tonight and available for questions. I can get the screen moving. Can somebody click that forward for me?
We have an hang There we go.
Okay. So tonight we have presenting our information. First, we have Kelly Rodden, who is an occupational therapist with TheraPlay. She actually joined TheraPlay in September of 2016 after graduating with a Master's of Science degree in Occupational Therapy from Salus University. Prior to joining our Newark team in Delaware as the center manager, Kelly worked at TheraPlay's Landenberg Center for 2 years and was also a student with us before that. Kelly really enjoys having a team to collaborate with to support each child's overall success in therapy. She has years of experience working with children and especially enjoys working with those who have feeding difficulties and sensory processing challenges. And we're also excited tonight to have Taryn Sharkey, who is with a Nurturing Mind. And she is a licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in helping families and couples who feel stuck due to many reasons and life circumstances. She has worked with individuals of all ages who have struggled with a range of barriers that have negatively impacted their lives, including anxiety, depression, anger, trauma, and relational conflicts. After 10 years of working with families in various community mental health agencies throughout Pennsylvania and Delaware, she was passionate about opening her own practice called A Nurturing Mind in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Taryn is also a trainer and supervisor for the Philadelphia Child and Family Therapy Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and offers supervision to other family therapists through the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. We also have with us tonight Becky Kurtzmacher, who is with Continuum Behavioral Health in Virginia, and she is a board-certified behavioral analyst who's passionate about providing evidence-based interventions to children with developmental delays and their families in order to improve their quality of life. After growing up with a sister with autism, Becky began working in the field of special education in 2001. And then she earned both her bachelor's and master's degrees in special education from the University of Maryland. After working in the field for many years, Becky has completed postmaster's programs in applied behavioral analysis at George Mason University. And since earning her board certification in 2015, Becky has provided clinical supervision in the in-home setting and was serving as the director of ABA for a Northern Virginia location of an in-home agency prior to joining Continuum as a senior behavioral analyst. And then we may have a guest expert that will be joining us who is a pediatric nurse practitioner whose name is Ellie Joselle with AvoCare at Mainline Pediatrics. And she is has a background in the NICU and served in the neonatal intensive care unit in Washington, D.C. at Children's National Medical Center. And then she moved back to her home in the Phoenixville area, and she worked at the NICU at CHOP. She spent 7 months of clinical experience at the AvoCare Mainline Pediatrics. She enjoyed the atmosphere and quality of care provided to the patients and was thrilled when she was offered a job with the practice following her graduation. She's also in the process of becoming a certified lactation consultant as well. So she is also going to hopefully be joining us. So for any questions that anyone has, we have the panel of experts that I just talked about. So I am not going to take any longer. We're thrilled to have everyone on the call, and I'm going to turn it over to Taryn and Kelly.
Awesome. I think I am up first. Looks like I can't move the slide either. Would you mind doing that for me, Lauren, please?
Sure.
And this is Taryn talking, folks.
Yes, this is Taryn. And you know, here's a great example of anxiety at play. We practiced all of this before we went live, and now can't move the slide, but you know, you work with it. So my name is Taryn Sharkey. I'm going to get us started this evening. I hope everyone's doing well. The topic is peaceful parenting, managing anxiety and stress for parents, caregivers, and children during the pandemic. So let's start off with what anxiety is. The definition of anxiety is the mind and body's reaction to situations perceived as stressful, dangerous, or unfamiliar. It's the sense of uneasiness, distress, or dread you feel before a significant event. Thank you, Lauren. But anxiety is not always bad. A certain level of anxiety helps us stay safe, alert, and aware. It also can, but anxiety does become harmful when our bodies and our minds are able to recognize that despite a stressful or unfamiliar situation being present, we are safe. So I'd like to give an example of this because I think that we perceive anxiety and stress typically in a negative way, but it's actually very beneficial to us. So think about your kid or a kid you know, and think about them learning to ride a bike. I would say that learning to ride a bike, probably most kids feel nervous or anxious about. It's something new, they've never done it before, but they're excited. They want to learn how to ride a bike. But that anxiety is going to help keep them safe. So it'll allow them to be more aware. It might allow them to put their foot down more quickly, to look back to make sure a parent or guardian is there if they do fall. So that anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing. It's something that's going to keep them safe as they learn to ride their bike. But when anxiety isn't helpful is when our fight, flight, or freeze response kicks in. And long period of this will lead to unhelpful anxiety and potentially harmful symptoms. We can get stuck in a pattern of feeling anxious, and over time this can form a number of various anxiety disorders. So there's a little cycle there on the right that I think is really helpful in understanding this idea of I feel anxious, why am I so anxious? I feel anxious about feeling anxious, then I'm feeling even more anxious, and it creates this cycle where the anxiety becomes not only unhelpful but harmful. Why is anxiety increased during the pandemic? So the pandemic is something none of us have ever experienced before. It involves real fear of danger and uncertainty. The pandemic has altered our normal routines and schedules. I think this is a huge one. We can't get away from it. It's in the news, social media, signs all over the grocery store. And I think a lot of people, there was one question I think we're going to speak to later where we don't know what to believe, what information to follow. There's a lot of uncertainty around what's being said in the news and the social media, and the pandemic has isolated us. And I think this is really, really important. So I'm hoping we can take a second here to do a little activity. If everyone wouldn't mind closing their eyes and imagining something that scares you. This could be a haunted house or a roller coaster, public speaking, going to the dentist or the doctors. Just think about anything that makes you nervous or that could scare you. Think about how this makes you feel. Do your palms get sweaty? Does your heart start to race? Do you feel a little sick to your stomach? How do you feel it in your body? How do you feel it in your thoughts? Now I want you to think of somebody you love and trust. Maybe it's a spouse or a friend, a sister or a parent. Now imagine that same scary thing, but now that person is with you. They're holding your hand. They're encouraging you. You can do this. You've got this. Those feelings might still be there. Your palms might still be sweaty. Your heart might still race, but does it feel different? And I would suggest that it does, because when we're alone, things that scare us or create anxiety for us always seem worse. But when we have somebody there that's encouraging us or telling us it's going to be okay, or just maybe just their presence alone, it really helps calm some of those things and makes us feel a little bit more safe. And unfortunately, the pandemic has isolated us where we're really, our social networks, our ability to see friends, family, the people we trust, those loved ones that I had you picture, they're not as accessible as they used to be. And we can feel very alone. We can feel very isolated. And this has a really strong effect on us and anxiety and how it manifests. All right, Lauren, if you could go to the next one, please. So how does anxiety differ for children? Children also experience anxiety, but it may look different. Children's anxiety tends to show itself in their behaviors. And this is definitely not a list that includes all of the things that you might see, but some of them are difficulty concentrating, not sleeping well or having bad dreams, not eating, getting angry more quickly, wanting to be around their parents and caregivers more, crying often, talking about being scared or being worried often.
So I'm going to jump on in. Like Lori mentioned, my name's Kelly and I'm an occupational therapist for TheraPlay. So when we talk about children's anxiety and how that plays a part, we're also curious, well, you know, if the child has sensory, executive functioning, and or just natural behavioral challenges ahead of time, could that be contributing to what's going on? So again, when we have all those things, we're going to have difficulties with emotional regulations, those heightened anxiety, that's automatically happening here with this pandemic for everybody. And in many cases, it could be a combination of all of these issues. Sensory and executive functioning and behavioral issues are very much intermingled and there's very difficult to separate. So meaning that it's very hard to tease out, you know, is it a sensory challenge? Is it an executive functioning challenge? Or is it a true behavioral challenge? And most times it could be a combination of all or a combination of two. So it is hard to tease out. And we're finding that with everything going on with this heightened anxiety, we're also seeing, you know, heightened sensory challenges, executive functioning, behavioral challenges as well. Of course, they will impact the child's ability to regulate their emotions. And like I mentioned, it's very much intensified at this time. I think about a lot of kids that prior to this, you know, maybe they fell under the radar with maybe having some sensory, executive functioning, behavioral challenges. You know, it was manageable, or, you know, it was kind of, like I said, under the radar. We weren't really paying too much attention of it. And now with the new structure that we're living in and, you know, the lifestyle that we're living in, stuck at home and starting to see there's an increase in these challenges. You might have more of those emotional outbursts. They may have more sensory processing red flags that are popping up. Again, all due to the fact that their structure of what's considered typical for them and their experiences are now, you know, changed. And again, is, you know, now that it's becoming nice out, it's been better, but when this first all started, you might have seen a huge decline with these kids being stuck at home. They're not being able to move as much as they used to. They're sitting in front of screens and they're not getting the input they need. So again, all of that plays a role in, you know, their sensory processing and being able to carry out their daily routines if they're getting that input. And with this new lifestyle, that has since, you know, impacted that. Do the next one. So why children with special needs are struggling even more? I mentioned this before. Their structure and routine has been changed just like ours has. But for kids in general, regardless if they have special needs or not, structure is huge. I know myself, structure is huge for me. And so when everybody's routines or structures are adjusted, obviously we feel uneasy, we feel that anxiety, but even more so for those kids that have other special needs that are, now heightened at this time. And so what's really important is we're still addressing those sensory and executive functioning challenges, but what would be considered in a new normal, and trying to help the children to still be able to regulate. I know that when all of this first hit, I got involved in teletherapy, and the first thing that we did with the family was try to create structure or routine for what would be considered their new normal. When we were able to provide them with that structure and a routine for the family and the child, things were starting to fall back in place because, again, everything has been wiped away. And as I mentioned before, when you have that increased anxiety, you're going to have those increased in emotional outbursts, those increase in those heightened sensory challenges and behavioral challenges. So it's very important to start with developing that structure and routine that would be considered, what's typically the new normal for these families or for you guys and your children. So how to help yourself and your family. Breathe. Something as so simple as breathing. I feel that this is something that I've taught kids prior to the pandemic as just an emotional regulation technique on how to truly breathe. We forget about this as such a simple way to help manage your anxiety and manage the emotions that you're feeling. It's super important. It helps increase the flow of oxygen to the brain. It stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes calmness. It promotes awareness from your mind to your body and helps you to slow down. Again, when we have children that are upset, that are, in an emotional state, telling a child to breathe, it sounds easier said than done. So you have to be creative in how you're going to encourage the child to breathe. A lot of times we'll try to teach the children to, different riddles or different songs to help with breathing. So one that I love is, smell the flower and then blow out the candles. Just getting them to take a stop and just take a minute and really focus on that breathing. There's a bunch of different fun apps out there that you can utilize to help with the child to get them to breathe. A lot of different techniques to encourage appropriate breathing, because again, this is something that's super simple that can be done anywhere at any time, and it truly does help to promote calmness, and that's what we need. I say it to myself all the time. I'll sometimes take a step back and just say, okay, let me try to take a deep breath. And it truly does help. So finding out the best way to support your kid, and that might be just one of those things that you can easily implement.
Awesome. And I was just thinking, going along with what Kelly was saying, it's so helpful for children if you do it with them. So don't, it's easy to say, all right, take some deep breaths or breathe, or remember to smell the flowers, blow out the candle, but do it with them. They're so much more likely to do it with, if you're doing it with them, if they see you doing it, if they catch you doing it and see that you're using it to self-regulate. I know, I love that one. I haven't heard that one, Kelly, of the smell the flowers, blow out the candles, but I know that there's one that I use with cookies where it's, picture your favorite kind of cookie and it's coming out of the oven, and what's the first thing you do? You breathe in that smell of the chocolate chips or the peanut butter cookie, and then what do you do when you go to grab it? You got to blow on it because it's so hot. So there's so many cute little ways to teach kids how to breathe, and to be honest, they're super helpful for adults too. So I love that, and I love that Kelly punctuated that. There are some other things we can do though too to help ourselves and our families. I think one of the biggest things right now is controlling what you can. And Kelly spoke a little bit to the structure and how important that structure and routine is. It's important to the entire family. Structuring you and your family's day, whether that's sticking to bath time at 8 o'clock every night, whether it's having dinner as a family every night, even things like waking up at a decent time, not sleeping in. If you're used to waking up at 7, still waking up at 7, still getting dressed and showered in the morning. All of these things are really, really important to keeping that structure and that routine in place for you and your child, and really being able to control what you still can control, because there are a lot of things that still are within our control and that we can still do to feel a sense of control even during the pandemic. Another really important thing that could help you and your children is staying active. Go outside, go for a walk, ride bikes, roller skate, skateboard, whatever you want to do. Get outside. Right now, we're really lucky that the weather is not cold. I mean, it might be a little warm. It's been a little warm the last couple of days, but we can get outside and we can take advantage of it being summer, getting that sun exposure, which really helps increase levels of serotonin, which is proven to help decrease feelings of depression and anxiety. We've also found that the availability of sunlight has an impact on our mood, and it actually has more impact on our mood than any other environmental factor, including rainfall or temperature. And sunlight also has been proven to help your body produce more melatonin, which is a chemical released by your brain and helps you fall asleep. If you were to guess if anxiety increases or decreases if you're not sleeping well, I would imagine a lot of you would say it probably increases, just like a lot of things. If we don't get a good night's sleep, if we don't get enough sleep, same with our kids, they get cranky, we don't feel as good, and guess what? Anxiety increases. So by being able to get that sunlight, get that exposure to some more melatonin, also being active helps us sleep better at night. These are all things that you can still have control over and do to help yourself and your family during this time.
Taryn, we have a question.
Yes.
So Megan is asking, assuming they have the cognitive ability to understand these examples, and these are great solutions for people with time, energy, and money, this sounds like living in a bubble parenting. So do you have any advice, either you or Kelly, on, I guess if you're not able to be in the perfect kind of situation for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I guess meaning like you're not able to structure your day or you're not able to be outside and be active. Is that what you're gathering, Lauren, from the question?
I think so. Megan, if I'm incorrect, you can send another message and we'll clarify.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to knowing what you can control and implementing whatever that is, even if it seems like some of these things are really far, they're out there, they're going to be hard to attain or to reach. I think what we don't want, and what, at least I've seen, is kids that are left to just sit in front of the TV or sit in front of an iPad, be on their phones the whole time, or they can go to bed whenever, wake up whenever. They're really struggling. And so even if it's something as simple as, like, let's say your kids are at home and you're at work, maybe you do a check-in call at 12 o'clock where they know that you're going to call and you're going to talk for a couple minutes. It really is going to be a case by case, because this is such a different circumstance that we're in. But I think anything that you can find that you can have control over is great. Even with the staying active, if there's maybe an app or there's something on TV that you can use to get your kids to do something active, anything that is possible and within your control, I would say it all will help. It doesn't have to be, such a structured day or such a, ideal thing as getting out and being able to be outside for extended periods of time. Kelly, do you have anything you want to add or any thoughts you have?
Yeah. I was just thinking too, as you were talking, like, of course, like, no one can just sit around and make a beautiful star chart or visual schedule or anything like that for what is expected for the day. But could you implement something that is that simple, but you also see, an outcome at the end of it. So like, you know, like you said, like we need them to feel purpose in their day. So let's give them 3 things that they have to check off. And again, it could just be a list. It could be something that you put on your refrigerator. It could be something visual that you print out. There are great resources out there that are easy to print out that just show like a schedule that the kids can sit with you and make something, and then you can have them to remove things and move it over after it's completed. Just that in itself is something that may provide more structure in their day. And again, it doesn't need to break it down between we get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we eat our breakfast, and then we put our clothes on to that specific. But can you do 3 things that, you know, would get them moving, get them outside, or get them to do a specific task and see some outcome from that? Like something as simple as, you know, it's a rainy day. Well, how do I get them to get some physical activity? Because I know that's good for their health. Can we, like Taryn was saying, is there a specific YouTube video that encourages kids to get up and dance, or model like a yoga thing online that, hey, at 3 o'clock we do some gross motor activity, may that be being outside, or you can choose something to be, you know, a video that we have selected. Again, developing some of that structure, it does take time to initiate it, but after you have like a nice little like blueprint of what you're looking for, it provides the kids and yourself with some kind of, I don't know, I guess, positive outcome at the end of the day. And again, it is very much case specific. Like I would have to meet the children and the family specifically to give you exactly like, oh, let's try this since you've already tried X, Y, and Z. So it's hard to pinpoint, but that in itself might help. I don't know if that answers her question completely, or.
No, that's great. And we actually do have a another question as well. This is from Barbara.
Can I jump in 1 second too, just to add on to that? This is Lori. You know, one of the things that we're trying to do with the Theraplay family of companies is provide through social media like easy, low-key activities that could help. You know, we're doing a little yoga session this Thursday, and these might be things that maybe you could build into that schedule, that at the end of the day, all right, let's pick one, let's look at these activities, let's pick one to do and have that be part of the structure. Like not only us, there's a lot of people that are doing similar things on social media that you might be able to tap into. So if you can't go for a walk during the day or it's raining out, you can at least build this into the end of the day schedule possibly. So just want to throw that out there as well.
So we do have a question from Barbara, and she says her son is very active and wants to go outside all the time, but he has bad allergies whenever he goes out to play. And since this pandemic, I have been sick on and off. What should I do with my situation?
I can kind of speak to that a little bit, just because a lot of times as an occupational therapist, I'm working with families that have those kids that are always on the go, and with what's been going on, I know that's even more so. Again, trying to find activities that you can do indoors that is going to give him the appropriate input that he's been seeking. So does he love to climb? Does he love activities that encourage him to use his muscles and put a lot of pressure on his joints and things like that? Well, those are activities that you may want to start encouraging him to do at home. And it could be as simple as, okay, so my son's going to push the laundry basket from one end of the room to the next to help with that act or that chore that we have to do. But in itself, it's loaded with a lot of stuff. He's getting some input from that. And so that might just be a little bit of what he's been seeking. Now, that might not be enough. So can he, just part of your routine, okay, we have to brush our teeth and now we're going to go to the other room to put our clothes on or whatever it is. Could we do animal walks in transitioning from one room to the next? He's going to get input in that way. And so he may not be, jumping up and down saying, okay, can we go outside? If he's been getting these other experiences earlier in the day, just part of his routine. So there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of look at what you have at your home. You don't need to do anything crazy. You know, can we encourage him to carry heavy things, bringing in the groceries? Can he push the laundry basket if he's going out at all, you know, depending on the situation? Can he push a cart at the grocery store if he's getting involved in any of those things? Can we implement every day at 3, we're gonna put on a yoga video or some type of gross motor video that he can get some nice input. So there are ways to be creative with the space that you have and not have to get outside. But my biggest thing would be start encouraging more movement throughout the natural occurrences of your day. And again, some kids may need more than others, but if you start there, you may see less of the constant need to be outside.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. This question might be, I'm not sure who the best one to answer this would be, so I'll throw it out there. We have Megan who's asking, what would you do if the place where you're receiving therapy caps your visits at twice a week, and I guess your child may need to come more often?
That's tough. Insurance is tough. I like joke with families all the time. I'm like, if I could just see kids for free and not have to go through insurance, I would do it, but I gotta need a job too. So that is tough when insurance kind of dictates what you can get. My biggest thing, I don't know where you're getting therapy, and I know with the current guidelines that we have in place, at least for Theraplay, we're trying to discourage a lot amount of people gathering in one room. But the biggest thing that I would ask your therapist is, hey, in those 2 times that they are going to the therapy session, is there a way that they can encourage some more coaching for you so that you feel that you have the tools to carry that out, you know, outside of the session? So, you know, I had one family where they needed to be in the session because, again, I was like, if I could see this kid 5 days a week, I would. And so what we did is we started bringing the family in the session, and I coached mom on the techniques that I was using, and I got her involved in the session. And then she was able to carry that out at home with like an activity a day or a couple activities a day. And that helped with his overall participation. Now, again, now that where we're at, some families can't get into a room. So ways to be creative. I've had families, you know, video chat into the session where I'm educating them as I'm working with the child, providing specific instructions so that they feel that they're getting a lot of knowledge from that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is giving the family the knowledge and the tools that they feel that they can then implement at home. Another thing is, when you try those things at home, record yourself, bring it back to the therapist, have them you know, use that as a coaching opportunity and say, hey, you know, this looks great. Can we, next time you do this at home, try it this way and see how you do. So I think, again, you have to be a little bit creative, but that might be the best way to help support your child if, again, you're only able to get in at that 2 times a week. Because, again, we really want them to be functional in all the other settings, not just the clinic. So I'm hoping that helps.
Awesome. We do have another question. My 10-year-old boy is very active, but during shelter in place, he's been so used to his cell phone, the TV, and iPad. Now he refuses to go out. What can I do to help him to go out and get some sunlight?
So this is another tough one because, again, that's like almost like developing like a learned behavior for him for the last couple of months. This is just kind of what we've been doing. And now that it's sunny, we can go outside. So can you, I'm big on structure, but can you set up a structured routine in the sense of, okay, you get X amount of minutes a day for your iPhone or iPad or what have you, and set that limit. There are, I know, like certain apps out there that will turn off the data after a certain amount of time. So then they're kind of stuck like, okay, I guess I'll go outside. I mean, there's ways to be creative around it. Or can you do it the opposite way? Can you say, hey, listen, like, I understand you want to be on your phone and computer, but I need you to do X, Y, and Z. You need to check that off before the end of the day. and may those things be something outside as one of that activity. So, and again, initially you might need to use reinforcers to encourage that initiation of that plan, because this is what's been considered their new normal. And so we just kind of need to find ways to help, teach them a new normal.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just jump in real quick as well. As a behavior analyst, one of the things we really focus on is first then contingencies. So saying first we're going to do this and then you'll be able to earn that. And with that first part of that expectation, setting that bar kind of low to start with. If I say you've got to read 5 novels and then you can go on the internet for 5 minutes, that's not really going to appeal to anybody. But if I say, you know what, we're only going to read the book for a minute and then you can get your device, and we up the ante a little bit as we go based on that individual kiddo's needs. So looking at what is feasible for them to do and what is more likely for them to be palatable with, and then increasing the bar as we go.
I was also going to say, what's important for them is also important for us. So if you're able to also get outside a little bit more and encourage them, hey, we're going to go outside and you and I are going to do this, or we're going to, grab some chalk and we're going to draw on the sidewalk. Or I think that kids, are much more willing to do things with you, and especially if it feels like a game or fun or an activity. So if you're able to get out and do some stuff, or you want to watch them ride their bike or tape them. I'm gonna tape a video of you doing something outside. Just that interaction and being there. It kind of goes back to isolation, but in a different way. I think when we're asked to do things by ourselves, we're less motivated just as people. And I think kids are similar. So if there's any way that you can go out, or somebody, if there's an older sibling or maybe a neighbor that your 10-year-old really gets along with, anybody can go out and engage them and get that routine and kind of break that pattern of being stuck in the house. All of that are great options as well.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We have another question. This is great. This, I'm sure a lot of people are experiencing. What would you suggest if both parents are working from home with pretty busy work schedules? How would they follow a schedule for an autistic child who's 5 years old with a lot of behaviors? She's getting a lot of screen time because we have no choice, and she has become extremely stubborn.
I would say start with number one, giving yourself some grace. We are all in a completely new situation that we've never dealt with before, and we're learning as we go. So if she gets a little bit of extra screen time, it's not going to be the end of the world. You'll just make baby steps towards what your priorities are. And then in terms of things that you can do moving forward as you take those baby steps, maybe focusing on something like a visual schedule. So if she's using something along the lines of PECS or whichever communication modality she's using. ChoiceWorks is a great visual schedule. It's an app. I think it's $5.99 when you download it. That gives you a chance to create that flow. And initially, it's something where you say, we're going to set the schedule up together, but you work towards the end goal of the child being able to navigate their schedule more and more independently too.
Becky, I'm so glad you started with just giving yourself a little kudos, because I think that a lot of parents I speak to, a lot of caregivers I speak to, they forget how well they are doing despite the circumstances. And I think it's so important that we acknowledge what we're doing. We're acknowledging that we're trying. We're acknowledging, that there's a lot of barriers, but you're figuring it out and you're doing a great job. So I just also want to encourage that to give ourselves, to be patient with ourselves in the same way that we will be with our children, and really know that you're doing a great job, and to keep trying, and know that each day is going to be a different barrier or different struggle. But I really appreciate that you acknowledge that, Becky. I think that's huge for parents and caretakers right now.
And Becky, could you repeat the name of the app that you suggested?
Yeah, there's a great scheduling app called ChoiceWorks. It's $5.99 on the App Store. I don't get any money for that, but I love it. They also have a visual calendar. I usually just download free apps, but that's one that I actually spent money for because it was worth. It's definitely a great one.
Awesome, thank you. And then we do have another question. Our middle son is going into kindergarten. We've decided to do cyber school due to the pandemic. Any advice on how to help him cope with the transition, which is compounded by his disappointment of not having the same big deal experience his older brother did?
I could talk to some suggestions on like strategies you can trial. Like things to help with the transition. I mean, it's going to be a different transition in general, but like social stories are great and they're super easy to make. So you can make them, I actually make them on like the PowerPoint and print them as pages. But you know, you in those social stories, you're talking about the situation, you're acknowledging the child's feelings, and you're having your child make it with you. So, for instance, like something as simple as going to school. You know, Johnny goes to school is the title, and then you talk about, you identify like, oh, when you go to school, you feel like this. How do you feel? And have the child identify their feelings, and then put it in the story, and they get to pick pictures to put in it, and then they talk about, you know, now, you know, this time I go to school, it's going to be different. And it made me feel like this. And how would that make you feel? And have your child identify that and put it in there and recognize that that's an okay thing, because you know, and in the story, talk about a solution. What could you do to help yourself when you are feeling those ways? And put all of that in there. So it's almost like a nice little tool that you can develop with your child and utilize it and read it prior to starting school, and just get them prepped. And then when we're having a hard time, you can refer back to that story, like, hey, what did Johnny do in the story? Do you remember? You know, how did they get through that feeling sad? What did they do? And you guys are using that as a learning tool, and then also just a nice little transition tool that you can utilize.
That's great, Kelly. Becky, Taryn, anything to add?
I think there's a slide later on that talks a little bit about this, but just I think one of the most important things is to give kids a space that they can ask questions, they can talk about disappointments, they can talk about, you know, how come my older brother got to go to kindergarten, I can't. I think that's really, really important for them to be able to know that they can come to you with anything. So just creating that dialogue and creating that space can be really helpful for them as well.
Great. And then before we get back to the presentation, one of our attendees said she just downloaded ChoiceWorks. She wanted to give us a heads up. It's $9.99, not an issue, but just wanted to let everyone know. So I hope that you know helps you.
All right. Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have some interaction, because you know, this presentation is for you all, and we want to make sure that we are making it useful and helpful. So please keep the questions coming, and until Lauren stops us for some more, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to help yourself and your family. We talked about technology in maybe a not so great sense, that kids are really glued to the TV or to their phones or their iPads. But technology is also very helpful during this time, and we can use it in ways to help keep our kids connected, help keep our kids still on a schedule and in a routine, and really, really importantly, help them not feel so isolated and be able to use the technology to create social interactions. So if your child had activities or services that they participated in prior to the pandemic, a lot of them are offering virtual options. I'm not sure about Girl Scout, Boy Scouts, things like that specifically, but I know that there are karate places that are offering virtual sessions. There's definitely therapy services, whether it's therapy like you know, TheraPlay, whether it's therapy where they're talking to somebody about some of the stuff going on. Virtual is an option, and it's everywhere. There's virtual yoga. I know that I really like and follow someone who does virtual meditation for children. She's a teacher herself, and she posts different YouTube videos for that. So any way that you can stay connected to activities or services that your child had prior to the pandemic and use technology for that is awesome. Scheduling check-ins with important people in your lives, using FaceTime, Zoom, maybe it's scheduling a weekly Zoom meeting with grandma, or maybe it's scheduling, a weekly time to call a favorite aunt or uncle, and also using your network to help with some of these things. If you're, I forget who asked the question, but who spoke about being a working parent and her spouse being a working parent and still having to have a 5-year-old child to care for. Is there anybody that you can use in your network, any resource that you have, even if it's something like, hey, every Tuesday at 10 a.m. you're going to call your aunt, or you're going to call your grandmother, and using them as supports too to help you. It not only will help, like I said, you, but it'll also help your child be able to stay connected with those important people. And remembering anxiety is always worse in isolation. So maybe it's setting up a Zoom call with some kids that they would have done a play date with if it wasn't for the pandemic, and they can do something that way. There's a couple different games online that you can go on that like Uno and things like that maybe you could have your kids log on, and you can create some sort of a play date virtually. So really using technology for your benefit during this time. And then this is something that I was speaking to just before we transitioned back to the slides about conversations with your children. First and foremost, be honest with them. Kids are really, really good at sniffing out when you're kind of giving them the runaround. You're not really being honest with them. And that's going to make them feel more anxious, because they're not going to feel safe if topics are ignored, or they feel like you're not really telling them what's going on. If you don't know, be honest about that too. Initiate conversations and then answer questions, and be able to validate your kids, like saying, that's a great question. Make sure to give your attention during this time. That's really important. And if you can't, then maybe it's something where you acknowledge them by saying, those are really good questions. Those are really good thoughts. Mommy's working right now, but we'll be done at 5. We're going to have a date to talk about these things at 5:10, and giving them a time so that they know to expect it and it's predictable. And just asking your kids to come to you if they have questions or worries about the pandemic, and again, creating that space for them.
So in this slide, we talk about some tools that, as an occupational therapist, I use all the time for kids that come in for emotional regulation challenges. And like we talked about before, with what's going on, I feel like emotional regulation in general has been tough for not only children but adults as well. So it's a really good thing to find a way to help children increase their awareness of their emotions and give them an avenue to be able to express their emotions in a more healthy way. And some of these programs are really great at doing that. Again, they're all different. So like the Alert program, helps kids. It's best for sometimes younger kids or those kids that are kind of bouncing off the walls and they can't sit still. It teaches kids about their engine. So some kids, I talk about like a car, some engines run really fast, some run really slow, and some are just running just right. And so having them to be able to identify, is their body running fast? Is their body running slow? And what can we do to make our body feel just right? Is there a strategy or an exercise or something that we could do to make us feel just right? And this could be, again, it could be like when you're really angry or you're really sad. It doesn't have to be those bouncing off the wall. So again, using very simple terminology. Mom, my engine is super high right now. And that may be them telling you that they're really angry, and that gives you an opportunity to sit down and talk about it. The zones of regulation is one of my favorites. It's really focuses on that emotional awareness, teaching kids about their emotions. And we all have a lot of emotions, especially now. It's very hard for kids to identify how they're feeling. So what the zones of regulation does is they take everyone's emotions and we divide them into 4 colors. So we have our red, blue, yellow, and green. And I actually even simplify it even more sometimes for some of our younger kids. And I just do red, green, and blue sometimes. And what it does, it teaches kids, okay, when I'm in the red zone, I might be angry, I might be yelling, I may be, you know, so excited I have no control over my body, I can't sit still. And then when I'm in the blue zone, I'm sad, I'm tired. Green is when we're feeling cool, calm, and collected. We're feeling good, we're ready to focus and learn. And then yellow, we might be a little silly, or we might be excited, or maybe we're nervous. So again, it has all these different emotions, and it teaches kids about their emotions and how to sort them and what they look like on someone's face, and have them label other people, and then start trying to label themselves. And again, using the same technique like the alert program, where we're saying, okay, well, hold on, I'm in the green zone right now, or I'm in the red zone right now. What can I do to get myself back in the green zone? And using a different strategy or technique to do that. Again, there's all these other programs that are listed here as well. Superflex is another one that teaches for some of the younger kids about you know, superheroes and trying to be just like Mr. Superflex. And there's these team of unthinkables who are these villains, and sometimes, you know, they're all different names, and so we're trying to defeat them when they jump in our brain. So you can be creative with it when we're talking about our emotions. It doesn't have to be, you know, a sit down and get all serious. You can make it fun, and this way, using these techniques and these tools, they're starting to increase their knowledge on their emotions, and they're having a better time explaining it and expressing themselves. So again, I think you guys will, if you don't already have the PowerPoint slides, they'll send it on over to you. And these are, you know, programs that I would start looking into. Google them, try to find some resources, print some out, put some visuals on around your house, and see if you can start giving kids the words to help express how they're feeling, and use that as a teaching moment.
And Kelly, we did have a question, and I know you probably touched on this, but if you have any specific examples, we have someone who's saying, in our toddler room, we have some children who go into crying jags several times a day and are inconsolable. This happens especially when someone comes to the door, and this behavior is not typical for these children. They've been back in care now full-time for 6 weeks. So what would you suggest to help them calm themselves?
So can you repeat the first part? I missed it. They're just starting to cry?
They're in the toddler room at daycare, and they go into crying several times a day. They get inconsolable, especially when someone comes to the door.
Okay. So again, this is tough, especially because if you said they've been there for 6 weeks. It's tough. It's a lot of trial and error. I mean, I would try to utilize different sensory techniques that may increase their, you know, arousal or regulation. And again, it's very specific to the child. Are they motivated by bright lights? Are they motivated by songs? Are they motivated by, you know, nice squishes and hugs? You know, can you get them to follow a direction, but maybe you're modeling it for them and showing how much fun you're having. Maybe they'll get distracted and point in. It's pretty tough to pinpoint a specific example without, you know, being there, looking at your environment, seeing what else is going on. But those, I would say, try to find, which I'm sure you're already doing, but find those things that they're motivated by, that help on a typical day, that they gravitate towards. And if they won't initiate playing with it, can you model it and show how it provides you happiness, and see if they'll join in.
Awesome. Okay.
So the therapeutic intervention, so these are some therapeutic interventions that we'll utilize in the clinic for behavioral techniques. Again, I'm not a behavioral therapist by any means, but we do utilize different behavioral techniques that help us try to, you know, pinpoint what the behavior is caused by, or how to reinforce positive behaviors and things like that. So we thought it would be good to share these techniques with you guys too, to see if there's things that you can also implement at home. So the one thing that we do all the time is tracking logs to find out what the function of the behavior is. And the reason we do this is a lot of times we don't know what the cause is. So can you create like a little journal or a little log that every time you have a behavior, are you able to pinpoint what the trigger was and see if you're able to figure out what that trigger is, then maybe you can help intervene so that that behavior doesn't come in the future, or you're able to manage it better because you're expecting it. Token boards are great for, short-term or, positive reinforcement. If you're trying to get them to earn something, they get, 3 tokens every time they do something, and then, woohoo, you did it. And just seeing that visual is motivating for them. Picture schedules, like I mentioned previously, they're great for, following some routines or transitions, even first then picture schedules. So, can you have a piece of paper that, says first we do this, then we do, what you're working for. And you can make that a visual too. Can you print out pictures and make it very simple and concrete in that way? Again, all these techniques are very much related to building that structure. And I think the biggest thing is modeling the appropriate behavior. So, if you're noticing that there's a negative behavior being presented, can you model the appropriate responses and ignore the negative behaviors? And sometimes that in itself works well. So again, this is just some of the things that we utilize in the clinic. By no means am I a behavioral therapist, but when I work with kids with emotional regulation and sensory challenges, some of these techniques do help within the center, as well as setting some of this stuff for home for the families. So calm down, de-escalation, calming activities. I mentioned this a little bit with the one question of how can we help when things are super intense. So really honing into the sensory experiences. What do they gravitate towards that helps calm them? Do they calm with nice deep pressure and giving them hugs? Talking to them in a calm voice, or sometimes even just not speaking. Sometimes talking could be too much. Maybe you're just, using your hands and your gestures to encourage a calming transition versus talking. But again, using a calming voice works real nicely as well. Kids will feed off of the stress that they hear in your voice. Really feeding onto the environment. Can we turn down the lights? Can we get them to be encouraged, in any tactile play? Are they able to engage in something that's going to give them more feedback? May it be, I don't know, it could be something as silly as like a water table, or like a sensory bin, or something that they're going to get input in another area that's going to help calm them in a different way than just any old activity. And then heavy work activities. I mentioned this a while ago, like any of these heavy work activities are the ones that encourage the child to be using their muscles and their joints. So they're working pretty hard. So they're weight bearing through their arms, they're pushing, pulling, all of that. These types of activities are super organizing. They're one of the most calming activities that you can get a child to do. It automatically helps calm yourself. And it's one of the fastest ways to do it. So something super easy for little ones is sometimes I'll have like weighted balls or something heavy, and I'll have them pick it up and roll it down the slide. And that in itself, they're lifting it, that's calming them down real nicely. Or they're pushing something through a tunnel, or they're crawling over pillows or something like that. That in itself is hard, and that's going to calm them. I always explain to families, it's like us working out in the gym. The more we, exert some, muscle and strength and power, it makes us feel good at the end. Same thing with these heavy work activities that you can implement for the child. So again, tuning into your sensory environment and trying to find what the child responds best to. And some days it could be one thing, and some days it could be a different. So it's a nice trial and error thing that you guys can kind of play out to find what works best for the child.
All right, so just to wrap up here, I think it's really important to remember to be kind, be patient, and be loving, not just to your family, but also to yourselves. This is a very difficult time. There's a lot of challenges being faced that we have never had to face before. And it's really important just to remember those 3 things. And help them guide you and your family in the decisions you make and in the things you do as we continue to go through this pandemic together. And then of course, if you need additional help or support, reach out. There's a lot of different resources out there in the communities locally, but also throughout your state or through your region, that you can get support, whether it's formal support, like maybe reaching out if you would like to get more information from Kelly or myself, or whether it's more informal, where it's accessing some of these apps, accessing some of these videos or things online that can help you. But definitely reach out if you need any help or additional support during this time.
Yeah, and I think I'll hop in at this point and just, first of all, I just wanted to circle back to just ask Becky if you had any other things that you wanted to add, especially on the topic of behavioral techniques that you find that are helpful, that might be helpful to our parents that are listening in now.
Absolutely. So number one, we always talk about with behavior, it's so much easier to prevent than it is to de-escalate. So that's really where my focus is as a clinician and as a mom. So when I say prevention strategies, I'm thinking of things like setting the bar at the right place. I can't expect that my first grader is going to behave the same way that my fifth grader will. And likewise, I can't expect that my child who has a more limited language vocabulary will understand all of the same rules that my other child will understand. So setting those bars at the right place where we really position somebody for success and we're not asking them to do more than what they're capable of. And then once we have those bars set, communicating that in a positive and happy way. Sometimes I think right now it's a little bit hard to be a model of positivity, and certainly it's okay to share those emotions sometimes, but letting them know what the expectations are. So, hey, sweetie, tomorrow this is what's going to happen. First, we're going to wake up and we're going to eat our breakfast, and then we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and going over that in a positive way where they can have a heads up of what those expectations are going to be. And then I think so many great points of advice that were provided today. Focusing on routine versus a schedule is a big one that we always talk about. You might not be able to get your kiddo up at 8 o'clock every morning and have them brush their teeth by 8:15. Sometimes that just doesn't roll with our kiddos. So instead, I'm going to focus on the routine. We're going to get up and we're going to brush our teeth every single day. Yay, we checked off the box. We're on to the next one. Now we're going to eat our breakfast. We're going to get out of our pajamas. So like setting that bar at an achievable spot. And if we say, you know what, we're not going to worry about getting dressed this week. We're just going to worry about brushing our teeth, whatever those priorities are, and the values that are most important for your family. You don't have to build it all at one time. Rome wasn't built in a day. So identify those priorities that are most important for you guys, and then and start with those. And then the biggest thing that I would say, and I know this isn't specific to behavior, but I think it's important, is self-care. Self-care as parents is going to go a really long way. We can't pour from an empty cup. So the more that we can renew ourselves and the more that we can model being okay, our kids are going to do a lot better with that.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, to everyone that's on
Lori,
this webinar. Yep.
I'm sorry, we actually have another question, and then we have the two questions that were sent in last week.
Absolutely.
If Taryn and Kelly, I'm not sure if you have them in front of you or if you'd like to read them out loud.
Yeah, so I have the one question from earlier. It's a long one. So the question is, one of the biggest issues with my family is having to determine the difference factual scientific information that we can use to be cautious, and how much information is overblown or minimized due to politics. Not being able to clearly distinguish the two has made it very difficult for us to navigate on how to conduct ourselves during this pandemic. For that one part of the question, what I would recommend is, it's tough because we talked about it before, like it's all the news is, constantly in our face. Social media is constantly in our face. Try to make sure that to give yourself a better understanding is look and read those reliable sources, the CDC, the WHO, and look at a variety of those reliable sources, and try not to get overwhelmed with, what's saying on the news and things like that, because again, you do have to be cautious with some of these things. So just go to those reliable sources, and that would be my best advice for that. And then it continues, my wife and I are both high school teachers. We don't know what to do on how to run our household when and if we have to go back to work. It will be impossible for both of us to quarantine every day since we have two younger children, 5 and 10 months old. We have a high risk caretaker of the kids during the day, which intensifies the problems. We are attempting to establish a plan to keep the caretaker safe, but how far do we go with ourselves and our kids? This is a really tough question too. I mean, I feel like with the schools and what's going on with regulations, they're updated like weekly. I feel like that's been how it's been happening over in Pennsylvania. So it's really hard to say what school will look like and what is going to be expected. But again, you can only do the best you can. So, it's really tough for me to say specifically what to do, because again, things can change in 6 weeks for what school would look like. But give yourself some credit and follow what you can follow, and just give yourself some credit for some of that, because again, that's pretty. It's hard to answer point blank on that one. And then the last part of this question was pros and cons to holding our 5-year-old back from physical kindergarten and having them take the virtual option this year. There's a lot of concern about screwing up the social aspect of their development. He's already completed 3 years of preschool leading up to this, so we're not sure how much 1 year difference was going to be making. And again, use your instinct. You know your child better than anybody else. I really don't feel that the social implication will have a significant toll on your child just from the year, especially since they've had 3 years of preschool leading up to this. We have kids all the time that are homeschooled, and they're right on the docket for their social development. So again, you guys know your children the best, and trust your gut. And we'll all get through this. It's a crazy time we're in, but the uncertainty is real and the anxiety is real. But give yourself some credit, and you can only do as much as you can handle and what you think is best for your family. So keep on with that. So I don't know if anyone else has any other one to take any of those questions more and give more of an answer. I know mine are very general, and but that's kind of my thought after reading that question.
I just want to add in one more quick bit for managing behaviors that I should have mentioned before. Focusing on gratitudes and successes. I think so much right now is going on for our kids that we've never faced, they've never faced, and we really need to give ourselves some props and also give them some major props. Like, wow, you've been so flexible with this. I'm so proud of you. Or I love the way that you knocked out that first thing on your schedule today. So if we can get into that momentum of finding the things that are going well, I think that would be good for everybody.
Actually, Becky, I think that can really help us with the second question we got. The question was, when your child says no, doesn't listen, or ignores you, how do you avoid the constant back and forth? We tried distraction and giving choices, but sometimes it seems like nothing works and the situation escalates or they run off. Our son has some minor sensory issues, and sometimes he will body twist and become yellow, but sometimes he is really just acting like a 4-year-old boy and is saying no because he does not want to do what we are asking. And I was thinking in reading that question about some of those things you just mentioned, Becky, like how how can you also look for the things that the child does do well and acknowledge that, not just focusing on the no or not listening, and how can you turn it around and make it something that seems more enjoyable or something that they want to do. But the therapist in me also says, by the child saying no, not listening, ignoring you, if those are newer things, or those are things that have started to increase in the last couple months, really taking a look at how all of these things might be affecting him, how these things might be showing up in the behaviors you're seeing, and trying some of these things, whether it's creating that space to have conversation. I'm guessing he's 4, so maybe more of like a social story like Kelly was talking about would be helpful to create a dialogue. But for me, it wouldn't be surprising if you're seeing your kids have more of these behaviors that seem defiant-esque in nature, with the no and the not listening and the ignoring. But really, there might be something going on deeper, and there probably is something going on that you could start exploring and trying to figure out. Is it the lack of routine? Is it the lack of physical activity? Is it not being able to go out and go to their normal therapy services or social services, and really trying to understand what your child is saying and why the behavior seemed to be getting worse.
Thank you, Taryn. Anyone else have anything to add to that question? We do have one more that came through.
The only other thing I would say that might help also with, for the child that's always saying no or doesn't listen, try it. And this is what I do a lot of times when we have those kids that are having a hard time following any adult direction. Try joining them in their play. It's their preferred activity. Try joining them in on that. Will they let you share in their play? And then will they let you change one part of their play to your direction, and then engage in that and start there. And that's a non, and it could be less in their head like a demand or chore, because again, it's their play, but you can just start there and get them to follow some of your direction at the end of the activity. That's a positive thing to reinforce, like Becky was saying. Say, oh my gosh, you did so great following my direction or whatever. And again, it's a play routine, so it should hopefully end up positive.
Yeah, and even maybe reinforcing sometimes, obviously we can't do this every time, but reinforcing the no. Wow, you just told me you don't want to do that. Tell me more. Like, what don't you want to do about it? For kids who are at that language level where we can find out a little bit more, or trying to help them discover why they don't want to do that, and giving them the words to go with it, because there's so many things that are happening right now that we really don't get a choice over. So if in some ways we can acknowledge those choices, I think that also goes a really long way too.
Great. And then, so here is, I think, what looks like our last question. I have a 3.5-year-old who had her world rocked with the pandemic, changing her routine, but also adding in a new sibling. She's regressed in potty training and sleep routine. It's been ruled out as anything medical. When do we worry or take action about not making good progress with these regressions?
Okay. So that's tough, because again, that's 2 large things that are impacting, which is huge to your guys' family routine in general. The one thing is I would I'd be interested in trying different things and teaching the child about different things. Like, well, she's 3, could you create a social story for her to talk about going the potty, or could you give her a social story about being a big sister? And just try to give her some way to understand it all. You can also think of with potty training, I'm sure you've done it under the sun, a bunch of different techniques to encourage children to get back onto the potty. But can you make it a routine where maybe a couple times a day you have them sit on the potty, and then when the timer goes off, they can come off, or you're just getting to that part of their new routine. I think, it's tough because she's 3. And I think if you trial a bunch of things, it's not a bad idea to seek out, other advice from a professional. But again, I would trial some of the things that you guys can do at home and see how you can make that work. But it's hard to say specifically without knowing like all the ins and outs, how to, when is the appropriate time to seek out help. I'd be interested to know, like, how does she do with other routines besides just, potty training and things like that? Is she, acting the same way with play? Is she acting the same way in other daily things that she does? Can you intervene there to help direct some of that? So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I think the social stories might be a really good way to start, given already done something like that.
And I would say too, kind of looping in the pediatrician or the other therapist, because they're able to help with seeing that whole picture. Continuum does offer both potty training services, consultation, and sleep training services by behavior specialists. And we provide those via telehealth and in person in the Pennsylvania area as well as the Northern Virginia area. So we're available for that service if you would like it. But I know that there are a lot of other clinicians who provide a similar service that maybe you could tap into your personal network for as well.
And we also, on August 11th, I believe we're going to do a webinar that is going to include the sleep challenges that children might be having now as well. So we might be able to have, provide some additional strategies during that also. So.
And if possible, I was just gonna say, I would add, and if possible, find some time in the day that it can just be for you and your 3-year-old, even if it's something that you would typically do, like cook dinner at night. Is there any way that your child can help you and it's just special time? Or right before bed, can there be 5 minutes to do a story with just you and your child? Because there have been so many transitions, and one of the hardest ones for kids is when they get a new sibling and they don't have, especially if they were the only child, they don't have their parents' attention all the time anymore. So just if you're able to find any time, even if it's 5 minutes, to have special one-on-one time, to make a big deal out of it, that could also help, because it might be something to do with that change that's happened in the family system, that just spending a couple special minutes with the child will help some of that.
Lauren, are there any more questions at this point?
No, there aren't. I just have one or two quick housekeeping things. We'll be sending out a link to the video either tomorrow or Thursday, along with the Act 48 forms if anyone needs to submit that for Act 48 credits. So if you didn't get them from the handout section during this meeting, we'll send it out with instructions on what to do to get those credits.
And we'll also send out the contact information for Becky and Continuum as well when we send that all out. So
Absolutely.
yes. And please, first of all, thank you to everyone that participated in this webinar. Be kind to yourself. It just shows that you're actually trying to find information to help yourself and your family and your children during these times. We're all in this together. We as an organization are trying to find ways to provide information to you, activities to you and your children. So Lauren is also going to be sending out a survey. So if you can please let us know, what else do you need from us? And we will certainly try to seek out the resources available for that. And these are tough times for everyone. We're really hoping that that we provided some strategies. I would personally like to thank Kelly, Taryn, and Becky for all of your advice, information, I think this was extremely helpful. I mean, even for myself. So if there's other topics that you're really struggling with, please let us know and we'll see if we can't put something together. We do have quite a number of webinars that we're working on right now. So we'd love to include any other topics that would be helpful for you. And, you know, our hope is that you'll have more strategies as a result of this. And we are just wishing you good health and mostly peace. That's why we named this Peaceful Parenting. And again, please give yourselves a pat on the back for taking the time to try to find more information to help yourself and your family out. Have a great night and thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night.
Thank you.